Very good evening to everyone. I am Neha, Ambassador of Change for GETI, that is Global Education and Training Institute. An idea that we just saw, that we just witnessed in the video that I just played. And a very good evening to everyone. And I'm very honored to have Ms. Mumtaz Sheikh, who is an author, a speaker, and a growth coach at AVP JP Morgan Chase, based in Mumbai and Maharashtra. And ma'am will be delving her experience and will be talking about studying the practical aspects. And I think a very important part of education, and certainly a very important topic for all our stakeholders today, and all our audience that is watching us today. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Neha. I'm a coach for JP Morgan Chase. I'm a growth coach. So that's the
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. And I'm adding your presentation. I think you were able to put your presentation in the background. So I just added to the stream. And you can now take us through the presentation.
Thank you very much. Okay. So Neha, it's my honor to be here, and it's such an exciting topic. When I asked whether you want or something that is taught me,
I'm so one second, ma'am. I'm so sorry to disturb you, but your voice is breaking a lot for some reason. I think is it the connectivity?
Can you hear me better? Softly, maybe that's.
Sorry, ma'am, I'm not able to hear you. Yeah, I would suggest that moving the earphones. You're on mute, ma'am, right now. Okay.
Can you hear me well now?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Well, clear.
Okay, I just took my earphones off. Okay, so great. So I was just talking about when I was asked as to whether you want to speak about anything related to education on this particular platform. Something that instantly hunched on me was we really need to study the practical. That's because as a student, I was always doing well, right? But when I grew up and I went to work, I saw that there is a vast amount of inequality amongst The people who are successful and the ones who are really, really doing well with their finances, with their wealth, with their health, and in as a business for themselves, as well as in their education, is not really the same across. As a matter of fact, even the ones who are not really studying so well, have not been such good students, don't have degrees, they're still doing well in life. So, what is it that is really going missing? So, I thought about this and I said to myself that when I grow up and when I did, right, I'm going to be doing something like this, which is my school is going to have students who are going to be dreaming of greater things and they will be encouraged to ask questions. Unfortunately, as a child, you've been always and always asked to sit down and just listen and confirm, sit down and just do what the teacher tells you to do, sit down and just do whatever anybody tells you to do. Don't question, which is where the growth actually stops. I learned something very critical from someone one point in time, in fact, one of my teachers, that two things that will leave you behind in life is one, which is if you don't ask, you will be left illiterate. And I don't mean that by degrees, I mean that by real knowledge, which you can actually go back and use. And if you don't ask for food, you're going to be left hungry. These are two very, very important things that you should never be ashamed of doing. And so I said to myself, that's not something that's happening currently. And then why is this happening, right? What is it that is going on in the current education system that really, really needs to change? And this is a great platform to share that. Now, we already have the knowledge as an adult. By the time we get into teenage and we become an adult, we've all attained our degrees, we've all completed our school, we've all completed our college. And we already have the knowledge and the power to accomplish most of anything that we want, right? However, we have not understood how we ourselves work. How we ourselves, meaning how our own paradigms work. Now, a paradigm is a multitude of habit, okay? And by design, most of us are functioning in a very habitual manner. And a paradigm is nothing but that. Now, this is a great subject to discuss at some other time, but I'm going to breeze through this because what I'm trying to explain here is if we do not understand what we are really doing, we will not be in a position to get better results. So just because we've been asked to do what is told in school and college, which most of us unfortunately have been victims of doing, and even now students go through that, there is superior knowledge. There's a lot of memory around physics, chemistry, biology, math, science, everything possible. But there are very inferior results. So why does this happen? There is too much of confusion and frustration around us by the time we get into adulthood. We do not understand why, after me studying so much, am I not doing well in life? Well, let's move on and see why. Unfortunately, this is the why. Unfortunately, this is the result. This is the inferior result that I was talking about. We have increasing amount of unemployment rate. And by the way, all of these people have studied in school and colleges. Exactly in the same system that you and I would have done that. A little bit of tweaking here and there. A little bit of subject changes done here and there. So why do we have like a mass full of population? And if I have to show you the statistics, these are some of the states of statistics here. How on earth can we all educate ourselves on paper and still end up with 13%, 14%, 24% unemployment? That we cannot even have a decent amount of take home to support our families. Then why is it that nobody wants to employ us? It's not that there is no employment. That's definitely not the case, right? This is right now the situation. The moment every child is born, okay, they are absolutely open to any kind of information that is going on in their environment, that is being taught in their surroundings, that is being taught by their siblings, that is being taught by their parents, that is being taught by anybody who's walking around. They develop a little bit of understanding of language. We put them into the school. Now, the moment they are put into school, we are currently judging them as a person who's going to be successful or not successful basis the amount of marks that you're going to get. So technically, we are actually only judging their memory. Now, we've been told that memory is good and memory is not so good. Well, let me tell you, there is no good or bad memory. There is only trained and untrained memory. And that's the brain coach Jim Quick telling us. Someone who teaches people on how to use their memory effectively. But we label people, and especially children, only because they don't fare well in a particular subject and that they don't do well in a particular examination. That does not have to define their future, but that is unfortunately the reality. So a child who was once innocent and very cute looking is already looking frustrated here. So what is it that we should do to change from where we are to where we can be? Right? It's something to ponder upon. Well, I studied this a lot. And when I did this, I understood that there's a champion of self-help called Bob Proctor. By the way, he did not even complete school. And just like many more people that I'll show you in the slides, this person was also someone who's not been through formal education. Yet, he for 60 years has contributed immensely to the growth of people. Here's what he says, that we need to develop our higher faculties. Now, as human beings, the moment we grow and the moment we are born, there are 5 senses that we have, and we all know that. We all know that we have the sense to hear, we have the sense to see, we have the sense to smell, the sense to taste, and the sense to touch. So our conscious mind will process everything and anything that goes through these 5 senses. But there's something beyond that, which is not taught in school, not even discussed as a topic, forget taught in school. And that's where the real magic happens. So that's such a big and such an important portion of our lives which is missing, which is we are not explained to use our sense of perception. We're not explained to use our sense of reason. Well, you don't have to reason is what we've been told. Just do what I'm asking you to do. Stop reasoning. Don't ask me too many questions. If you don't ask questions, how are you going to reason? Will, right? Someone has a will of doing something else. They don't want to become a chartered accountant. They don't want to become an engineer. They don't want to become any of that. But just because everybody is going that way, we're pushing our kids in that direction, or even we ourselves are guilty of putting our own lives through that. And for a really long time. And then comes a point in time which is called midlife crisis at the age of 30 or 30 and above, where we realize everything is falling apart. So why does that happen? That's because we realize that we are better than this. And unfortunately, by then, maybe 30 or 40% of the life is already gone. If you're lucky, then less. What's also missing is the sense of intuition, right? Human beings are the highest source of energy, and we are the highest form of creation of in the entire world, and by God. We are better than only animals falling in line to get their prey, eat, and sleep. We have a sense of intuition, which is being ignored, which is not developed because nobody's spoken about it. Nobody has taught us. We've been asked in school, if someone is sitting and looking outside the window, what are you dreaming about? Come back. We've been asked not to dream. Absolutely no use of imagination is allowed whatsoever. So that means by the time we become a teenager and by the time we become an adult, there is absolutely no use of imagination. So much so that as a coach, when I've experienced people coming to me and when I ask them to close their eyes and imagine what a successful life for them will look like, they're not able to. They're really not able to. That's because we haven't used that faculty in our brain. If I move on, and speaking of intuitions and speaking of dreaming, how is it that we have 90% of the population sad, dissatisfied, unhappy in their life, but still somehow meeting ends, doing odd jobs or borrowing, and living their life under the debt of repaying loans, versus 10% of the population of the world, extremely successful, extremely happy, knows what they're doing. They can keep on working for hours and it doesn't feel like work to them. That's because everything great started with an idea. Imagine if Edison would not have thought about getting this world illuminated. Imagine if Marconi wouldn't have thought about radio. Imagine if Ford wouldn't have thought about building a motor which is unbeatable. What is it that we would have had today? Well, speaking of Edison, I have a story that I want to really share. I'm not sure how many of you guys know, but maybe you know, maybe you don't, but it's worth revising. So when Edison was really small and he used to go to school, he was actually removed of the school and he was sent back home with a letter that he couldn't read because he did not have the ability of clearly reading words that time. That was around less than the age of 10. He comes back home with the envelope and he gives it to his mother. And his mother reads what's in it. And here's what she does. She closes the letter and she looks at Edison and says, "You know what the letter says, son? It says, the school is too small for the way your son is growing and developing. So we will not be able to accommodate him in our school. His intelligence goes beyond the boundaries of the school. So we request you to kindly teach him yourself." Years later, after Edison became Edison and he became the great creator, he was sitting down and he was identifying some of the letters that were kept that were very old. And he comes across this one letter that he was given from school. He opens the letter, and to his surprise, what he found in that letter was, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we cannot keep your son in school because he needs more help. He cannot read, he cannot write. So in our eyes, he needs a special school. We cannot keep him in a regular school." Tears roll down his eyes, and it gives me goosebumps every time when I either watch that video, discuss that story, or think about it. As to how a single perception, which what was written in the letter, changed someone's life. Now that could be someone sitting in your house, which is your child. That could have been you. That could be someone right next to you. So marks don't have to define us. He had an idea which changed the world, which is how would it look like when the ships pass by and instead of they crashing against each other in the dark seas, there was light that would help save so many lives. He thought about something much greater and bigger than himself, which is when he thought about creating a light bulb. So the light bulb is something that I dedicate to him, and also the fact that everything great started with an idea. And not just Edison. Speaking only of within India, these are the youngest Indian CEOs that you have as of today in the country. We all must have heard about him or seen him. This guy, Rishi, he was barely 17 years old when he thought about the idea of coming up with Oyo hotels. And by the way, he was a school dropout. And not just he, most of the individuals that you see over here, such beautiful, such successful men and businesswomen. These kids here are 14, these kids here are 15 and 7 by the time they decided to come up with an application that changed the world. So there's something that you might want to think about as to, have these people really failed in their life because they didn't take education? Or are we failing in our lives that we're not questioning what's happening around us? Well, I thought this is how a beautiful class schedule should look like for anybody. So I'm just imagining, and I would imagine you to do the same, and I would ask you to imagine the same. How would a school or an education system, not just a school, the whole of an education system look like, where the class schedule looks like this? Where on the first day, you are studying only about yourself, which is what 90% of the people don't do. 90% of the people fail to discover their own self, as a result of which they conform, because everybody is conforming. As a result of that, they face midlife crisis, they get frustrated with their lives, they end up with no job, and even if they do end up with a job, they are dissatisfied with it. So it's extremely critical to understand the way your own brain functions. Tuesday would be a good day for science and sport, and Wednesday, as you see. Well, here's one extra thing that you might want to think about. What is it that I have added on Friday? What's a mastermind? Well, I would be really happy if most of you know, but if you don't, I'm here. A mastermind is nothing but what kind of people do you hang around with? And I will talk more about that when we come to that. But that's an extremely underrated topic. Nobody wants to talk about it. Whilst most of the people live their lives basis what everybody around them is doing, they don't think about changing who everybody around them is. Because the moment you change that, it's a hack. Everything changes around you. Speaking of your mind, because it's a new subject in the education system, I thought it is my responsibility to, since I've introduced you, to explain it. Now, the credit to this and the gratitude to this completely goes to Bob Proctor, which is what changed everything in me. Everything in the way I thought about myself, everything in me, the way I looked at how I'm currently living my life. Well, this, by the way, is nothing but your mind. And this is your body. Our mind is technically divided into two parts, our conscious mind and subconscious mind. As you see here. Remember I spoke about the 5 senses? The sense of seeing, smelling, hearing, touching, and tasting? That's what our conscious mind is always processing. And it can reject or accept any idea. Guess why? Because you can read or hear any idea that you should be and you want to be doing or reading or listening to. Your subconscious mind, unfortunately, does not have the ability to accept or reject. Well, I won't say unfortunately, because it's fortunate that it doesn't. Because this technically is the place from which you develop your higher faculties. If you, in case, are planting an idea into your subconscious mind through your conscious mind, which is a positive idea, which is a successful idea, which is a growth-related idea, which is an idea which is going to change your life, which is anything but negative. It is the job of the subconscious mind to make sure that you get it from any possible place. Now, let me prove this to you. Have you ever realized that you were very, very confused about a problem that you have in your life right now? Or maybe about just a situation and you're not able to find out the solution to that? I'm sure we all have been through that time. You tried to find a solution, but you just couldn't. You sleep through it at the night. And suddenly in the middle of the night, you wake up with an idea on how you're going to fix that problem. Now, how does that happen? You were sleeping, right? So technically, you shouldn't be thinking. Well, that happens because your subconscious mind never sleeps. So that proves that it's always working. Have you ever thought or have you ever identified an instance where you really wanted to speak to someone? Like, I wanted to speak to Neha today. And Neha instantly connected with me. That's because my subconscious mind has the ability to connect with her subconscious mind because we're nothing but a mass of energy. So we are constantly at work. Now imagine if we were taught this when we were 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. What is it that our lives would have looked like? Imagine if we were instilled with this concept when through our education system, this was reinforced into us again and again and again and again. Wouldn't our conscious mind be not just getting bogged down with news, negative social media, people who are only going on travels on Facebook and making us sad? Wouldn't it be, actually making us a very, very different person from where we are today? I know the answer is a hands down yes. So the conscious mind, which is the thinking mind, which is the so-called educated mind, the intellectual mind, chooses, accepts, or rejects. This is where everything originates. So the whole secret is you originate the right idea here. Now, this wasn't taught to us anywhere until I was lucky that I have the inclination of studying this and I came across this. So today's session would have been incomplete and absolutely unjust if I was to not share it with the viewers today. So I recommend you take a picture of this. Here is what is another very, very important thing. Everything that you go through as a child, or even as a teenager, or even as an adult, is continuously creating your self-image. Let me take you to the time when you were a baby. Everything that was happening around you, into your environment, was directly going into your subconscious mind. Why? Because a child does not have the ability to accept or reject. You've noticed, right, that you can fool kids anyhow? You can just tell them, hey, sleep, or else there's going to be a scary monster coming, or else there's going to be something not so good happening. Well, you shouldn't be doing that because that's going straight here. If you do this, you're going to become a good child. If you do this, you're going to become a bad child. That's what's creating an image about their own self into their head. Which means whatever you instill here, since they don't have the conscious mind still active, is going to straight become a feeling, because this is a thought that you're instilling. It'll become a feeling and they're going to act in that way. Let me take you to an example of a child who is grounded because he's made to study continuously because of poor school grades. Now, this concept is something that I really, really learned from psycho-cybernetics. Now, Dr. Maxwell Maltz, in his book Psycho-Cybernetics, explains this concept of self-image in an entire one chapter. In fact, he talks about it throughout the book. And if you don't have the book, I recommend you to please, please, please get the book. Cybernetic is an instrument which is technically used in aeroplanes. Now, let me show you how. Have you ever noticed when you were going through an aeroplane ride and you had certain turbulence, and if the pilot had to check some settings, he put the plane on autopilot and it was still running? That's what the cybernetic instrument is. Believe it or not, you have one in your own head. Not in the physical form, but in the conceptual form. For instance, when a person is receiving poor grades in school, it is an expression of the self-image they hold. Which means, remember what I told you? We always judge our children based on the numbers they get, based on the kind of marks they get. We keep on telling them, you're a tougher, you're an idiot. Well, I hope you don't use those words, but this is something that I've heard and I've understood. It's a very, very common situation around. We keep on hammering the idea that they're not good because they haven't scored well enough in their exam. That becomes the image of that particular person. They're not going to get any better until that image of that person changes. Because the person believes that they are not very bright. And if your belief about something does not change, the result to that is not going to change. For you to change the result, you need to change the way you're looking at that thing, which is your belief. They, of course, receive a report card that reflects their poor self-image. The parent makes the child give up recreational activities, study, which means continuously, if you are making the child repeat the same thing, somehow he's going to score better marks. So they improve. But the improvement is temporary, which means the moment the examination is done, the child goes back to the normal routine, the child has never changed their self-image. Have you ever observed going to a motivational seminar or listening to someone who is very, very inspirational and going back and saying, I'm going to change my life this time and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. For a couple of days, you follow that practice. Then it all goes back down. Boom. Why does that happen? Because you have only changed your action for a certain period of time. But your image inside of you is going to make you procrastinate that eventually, because inside your head, you think that you're not consistent. You think that you're not good enough. You think that the other person can do everything, but you're not in the same position to do that. You think they are better qualified, they are better education, they are better skilled, but you're not. And if you are believing and looking at the same thing in the same way, your result is not going to change for a really, really long time. Therefore, what really needs to change is the way you are looking at yourself. So the self-image they hold, the person believes they are not very bright. Of course, they receive a report which is very poor. So I'll sum that up before I move to decision. So what we really need to do is, this is such an important topic that needs to be instilled in the education system. I keep on hammering back to that because that's what we're here for. That's something extremely critical, and you cannot miss explaining this to a child. Now, I have a 5.5-year-old daughter. And if you ask my daughter about anything related to my subconscious mind, she's going to tell you, because I've made it a point that she knows everything about it so that she grows up with it. With or without me, she's in a position to identify what kind of group of people she's hanging around with. What is it that she's listening to? What is it that she's reading? Unfortunately, not many are in that position yet. Not everybody has a coach in their house, do they? Not everybody is interested in studying this. So what do we do, right? What do we do? Even before we make a decision, we have so many thoughts in our head. We have so much of confusion around us because we don't really want to go wrong. So what's the next topic you think? It's going to be this very, very important skill, which is decision. Now you will wonder, Mumtaz has not taken chapter 1 to 7. Why is she talking about chapter 8? Well, this is not me in chapter 8. This is Napoleon Hill. In chapter 8 of his book called Think and Grow Rich, which I'm sure all of us have heard of, he has dedicated a whole chapter to decision making. Now he says that accurate analysis of over 25,000 men and women who had experienced failure disclosed the fact that lack of decision was near the head of list of the 30 major causes of failure. This is no mere statement of a theory. It is a fact. What he says that is indecision is going to be the primary cause of failure in your life. Most people, if I ask them to take a decision, take days to take a decision. And they're never able to. They eventually give up on it. And then they come back to it and say, oh, I missed that opportunity. I wish I had done this at that time. I wish I had decided at that time. Well, as the education system does not even allow us to dream, does not even allow us to imagine, does not even allow us to question, decision making is a far off dream right now for our kids and for our teenagers. Have you observed people around you, or have you observed kids around you, or teenagers around you, not able to make simple decisions as to what will be good and bad for them? Well, they're not to blame because they haven't had the opportunity of doing that. We've decided everything for them. What to wear, what are they going to do, what are they going to study, where are they going to go, who are they going to hang around with? If simple things like these are not being trusted them, if we don't trust them with simple things like these, how do we expect them to do well and make the right choices in the career? And more so, I think the reason why we don't even do that is because we don't want to make that decision. Let them do what everybody's doing. So, maybe he's becoming a doctor, so make my child also a doctor. He's becoming a engineer, so let them become an engineer. She's becoming a lawyer, so you also should become a lawyer. I've heard this, I've heard that. Well, even as adults, we don't take decisions which are right for our kids. And by the way, you shouldn't even take those decisions. Your kids have the right. Trust them. We are all human beings. We have the instinct. They know what they're good at. And so it's not the whole responsibility of only the parents, it's also the responsibility of the education system, because my daughter spends 7 to 8 hours of her time in the education system. And so do your kids. Most kids spend 8 to 9 to 10 hours only and only reading theory, which is absolutely impractical. And this is what gets me to speaking about study the practical. Because when we actually come out in the real life, we have no sense of what we're going to do, because none of that is taught in the books. We've spent 15 years of our life, 15 years, only reading something that's obsolete, something that may or may not help us in the real life. Even if it was to prepare us for an employment or a job, we're not even taught interview skills. Procrastination, the opposite of decision, is a common enemy which practically every man must conquer. So Napoleon Hill, in furtherance to decision making, says that procrastination, which is the opposite of decision, is a very common enemy. Now guess why do you want to procrastinate? Because you don't want to decide. And why you don't want to decide? Because you don't know how to decide. So the analysis of several hundred people who had accumulated fortunes well beyond the $1 million mark disclosed the fact that every one of them had the habit of reaching decisions promptly and of changing these decisions very slowly, if they ever changed it. People who fail to accumulate money without exception have the habit of reaching decisions, if at all, very slowly, and they keep on changing them really quickly. Now, you can 100% rely on this information because it's not coming from only me, it's coming from Napoleon Hill, who spent 20 years of his life studying 25,000 successful people. And it is absolutely wise for us to only use someone else's experience who's dedicated their life to it. Excuse me. So, guess and imagine what would happen if we include such an important component of our life, which you experience every single day. You, on an average, have to take at least 5 to 6 decisions every single day, even whether you know it or you don't know it. And why it is critical that you pay attention to that is so that they don't keep coming back to you. So this is our responsibility now that we know it. Moving on. What are the keys to success? What am I trying to say? Why do I think that everything that we've spent our time studying in the education system is impractical? Because the real key to success as a human being, as a person, as a student, is this: how to develop persistence. We're not even taught how to develop persistence. If we fail on our exams, very few teachers will encourage us to do well again next time. Instead, we are told, oh, too bad. How could you get this wrong? Well, that's not really a great motivation for them to try again, is it? Instead of showing us the why they should not give up on something, they are quickly asked to move to things that they are not good at. That brings me to the strength and opportunity conversation, and I can talk endlessly on that. Because all our lives we've been told, focus on the opportunities of yourself. Focus on the opportunities that you have. Whilst the opposite is true, what you really need to focus on is the strengths that you possess as individuals. Imagine if Edison and if everybody stopped focusing on what they are good at versus started building on their opportunities. I don't know at what point in time we would have had light. Imagine if the Wright brothers did not think about creating an airplane. You and I wouldn't be flying today back and forth in cities. They were technically called as sinners by the church fathers at that time, because they said, oh, you're promising some people something that's not true and you're going to be punished for that. But they didn't give up because of their persistence. They had a definite purpose, and it was backed by a burning desire to create something which is going to change the world. That's how the aeroplanes were born. Now, a definite plan. We've never been taught planning in school, have we? Yet we suddenly get into offices and a manager tells us, "What's your plan of action?" Well, imagine a fresher. You don't have a plan of action. We've never been taught. Expressed in continuous action, a mind closed tightly against negative and discouraging influences. The system does not have to really be full with theories and books around history, geography. Whilst that is important, it doesn't have to be full of it. What it has to be full of is this, that enables them to become more an independent and a successful entity who's not depressed. The examination results for 12th just came out, and even for 10th. The last 2 years have been different because we had COVID related results. But I remember reading in newspapers, and we all are we're very familiar with the fact that we've lost so many students only because they couldn't secure X mark. So can you imagine what's going on in their brains all the time? That the world, what is the self-image that they have? They have no self-worth. They choose to give their life completely only on the basis of one single examination, which does not even help them when you go out in the real life. I don't remember using pi theta. I don't remember using geometry. I don't really remember using any of the algebra or math or anything that I have used in my school, in my real life, in the last 14 years of my career. Even now, when I'm changing lives and transforming, I don't really need pi, cos, tan, theta. Then why do we need to waste all of our life studying that by missing this completely out? Or a friendly alliance. Now, with one or more persons who will encourage to follow through with both plan and purpose, this is also something that is critical, and this needs to be taught. So, these are the keys to success, and these are definitely extremely critical. So if you like, please take a screenshot of that, because this is a friendly reminder for you to change your life or someone else's life. And I can vouch that not even one single chapter was dedicated to this. So what do? I'll give you a hack. You surround yourself with a group of dreamers and doers, the believers and thinkers. But the most of all, you surround yourself with people who see greatness within you, even when you don't see it in yourself. I'll give you my example. When I was in school, when I was in grade 7, I had decided to take part in elocution competition. At that time, it was a big fancy. And even now it is, right? Public speaking, everybody likes that. Now, I got on the stage, and that was in 7th grade, and I forgot my own name. When I got off the stage, I saw 50 people mocking me and looking at me with eyes of shame. That put embarrassment in me, that put guilt in me, and that made me never go back to the stage for a good 5 years of my life. For a good 5 years of my life, I never went on stage. Until one day, there was this one true teacher in my life whom I'm never going to stop staying connected with, pushed me, and she said, "You can do it because I believe you can." Now, I knew that I couldn't do that because I never went on stage. I forgot my own name. So I knew that I'm going to mess up this time. But I believed what she believed, and therefore I did it. Now, thank God she did that, and I listened to her, and I surrounded myself with her. Today, I'm here. I have not just been able to speak my name. I became the best speaker of my college, I think. And I didn't realize this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, which is speak. I could just speak in front of I don't know how many people. It didn't matter to me. It didn't fear me. Because it all became about the message. And that was only possible because I surrounded myself with someone who believed in me, even when I didn't believe that I could do it. So if you are right now in a situation where you want to do something better in your life, or your kids are around there, and if you see that someone in the school or someone in any place of education is putting them down, you know they're toxic. And you need to take them away from them, because if you don't, they're going to create that priceless self-image, which will not be a positive one. And thus they'll produce the same results. So with that, I'd like to put an end to this presentation, and I would love to answer any questions that we have. And
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, I'm back. Thank you so much for that presentation. I'm smiling ear to ear. It was a very wonderful presentation, and also almost on the same lines of my own interests. I'm also very interested in, studying the brain. Basically, I understand, the subconscious mind and metacognition and everything. So thank you for, highlighting that part. One question that we would like to, if you would like to take that is, since you mentioned, the role of the brain, understanding the subconscious mind, and so many, some neuroscientific terms. There's one question that stays with us is, how to make teachers, give up their cognitive biases, basically, while they're, teaching in the classroom, so that they're able to better facilitate students. If you could like to take that question.
Sure. Well, I feel that mostly instead of always trying to explain to them what they should do, sometimes we need to show consequences too. I don't think we use consequences in the most positive manner, because if we really start showing consequences to people, even for that matter, in my life, when I decided to move away completely from corporate to this, I realized that if I don't do this, what would happen? Do I really want to spend the next 15 years the way I want to the last 14 years? So do the teachers really want to, impact their kids in a way that they remember them for life, or is it only in the way they think they should impact them? So I think the role consequence plays is very, very critical here. So we can use that to be able to explain that they're just going to be teaching them they're going to be teaching them for life. That helps.
Thank you, ma'am. And once again, to echo your topic, that is practical studying. How would you like to, sort of there's a thought that teachers should encourage students in a way, in a proper language, use languages of encouragement, and something like an example would be sit down. You sit down. A better alternative could be, would you like to take your seat? You're disturbing, the decorum of the class. Using that. So how can, teachers practically apply certain languages of encouragement in classrooms? If that's a question that makes sense, maybe.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I know what you're talking about is the soft skill part of it. Now, I'm a big fan of that, the way you use your words, because I have seen so many teachers, so many parents not using the right words with the right kids, which again has impacted the self-image. So, unfortunately, soft skills are hard to find, and that's a reality, right? It's not easy to find someone with good soft skills, and I have no disrespect for the country that I'm in. It's very common notion in India, the way we speak to our students versus if you visit some other country or if you visit some other school, the way they are being spoken to is completely different. And I really admire them for that. And I think it's high time when we are actually taking up the Western culture, we take some of the communication bit as well, because that is going to change the whole game. It's not the what. You might want to criticize the child for the wrong that he's doing, but it is the how that is going to leave an image. So I am in complete agreement of you saying that you take your seat versus just sit down and do this, because that sounds like aggressive, and that's like, you better do what I'm saying, otherwise, whatever.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, once again, ma'am, thank you so much for joining us. But before we conclude, I would like you to, maybe conclude, in your way, some actionable tips which teachers can start using maybe from tomorrow. Tomorrow also, I would say, because a lot of schools in the country begin their new session tomorrow. So it's a big day for all of us in the education fraternity. So any practical tips that teachers can start using day one from tomorrow, which you would like to, pour out for our audience that's watching and who will also eventually watch?
Well, you have my PPT. I've shared it with you. If they want to
Yes.
use some of those images to use and be aware, because the biggest thing in the world is awareness. If they can be aware of the way they are currently functioning versus how they want to function, and make every step of action. Also, one thing, I don't blame the teachers honestly, because they're just doing what they've been told to. So,
Yes, ma'am.
it all comes right from the top. If they can kind of bring about a little bit of revolution in that, if I don't want to do it this way, I will do it that way, that will go miles, not just for them, but for everybody else around them, which is majority of the students. So number one, awareness, and number two, doing the right thing. Like even if they don't want to do some things, they're being forced to do that, and that's not right. But so at the same time, I'm going to use the decision, because it's time for you to decide how you want to do your job versus how you've been told to do your job. Because most of the teachers that I know of, they love teaching, not that they don't want to teach, but they are just not happy about the way the whole thing is going. So, well, you are the soul of the whole education system, and trust me, you have more power than anybody else. So you are the one who can create a revolution, or you are the one who can keep that away and you can let it go the way it is going. So I would urge the teachers to, like I said, like Neha said, and she spoke about soft skills and communication, is to be more aware of your actions and not get into the rut of portion completion or this or that, and do it in a more pleasant manner where you can go back in the night and say that I did something really unimaginable today, and that's going to take you miles. So I think the only two tips that I want to share with them is be aware of what is happening around you. It's not just your job that you're doing, it's someone's life that's relying on you. And number two, it's your own life. It's your own life, so you deserve better, and you deserve to be a better teacher than what you already are. And you are the change maker. So get into the change making mode, and that's going to give great results, is what I feel.
Absolutely, ma'am. Thank you so much for those takeaways as well for our teachers. And thank you for joining us this evening. And I hope everyone who's watching is definitely going to take away something, bits that from you asked us to take screenshots from your presentation and once again from your concluding message. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today. And I hope to see you again.
Sure. My pleasure. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.